Hey, what is going on, YouTube? Aaron here. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Guys, we've got an educational slash tutorial one for you guys here in today's video. Sort of going back to our basic strategy series, just talking about the different classes, their roles and responsibilities, as well as sort of unique situations that I sort of remember playing recently. And for this particular game, this was, I wanted to do this piggybacking off of a game I had in the Pozharsky there, where we found ourselves in the middle, really, of Sleeping Giant, where the enemy sort of abandoned the middle, and we had beautiful crossfires basically the entire game. And while Sleeping Giant and Hotspot, and there's a few other maps that sort of come to mind, it is very difficult to hold the middle or, just really get the middle, because, like, in a position like this, you really have to play these islands here, and you're sometimes very limited based on what, where the enemy positions, trying to get damage. But if you give up the middle, as you will see in the Pozharsky game, I will link that in the description, you are giving up massive advantages. So while sometimes you don't necessarily need to directly play the middle, like Two Brothers is a great example. If you typically, most players won't, sail directly down the middle. I do most of the time. It's a lot of fun. But if you give up that middle, then you are putting yourself at a massive, massive disadvantage. So it's sort of one of those ones where you just have to learn through experience. But what you absolutely cannot do, as we talk about the roles and sort of just, again, basic strategy of this game, is sail across the map. So if you spawned over here at A, you have a choice. You can go to A. The outside of A here is a good, position, especially for a destroyer. But the last thing that you should do in a destroyer is take some obnoxious route all the way over here to put your ship, try to get this open water flank. I know destroyers love this, and it is a good flank for, a concealment destroyer like a Holland or something getting fast torpedoes on target. But if you take that flank, you are basically automatically putting your team at a disadvantage. So going back to basic strategy, if you're a destroyer over here at A, not only should you hold the side you spawn on here, again, as your responsibility in a destroyer, the roles of a destroyer, you are to spot, then you are to cap, and then you are trying to, defend or outplay the enemy destroyer if there is one, and then torpedo ships and get damage. I think a lot of destroyers immediately just go out here and try to get, torpedoes on battleships at the back of the map. And while you are sometimes spotting, if you will go this way and avoid the cap and the destroyers here, if a destroyer goes here, you're just leaving your team out to dry. So basically, just don't leave your team out to dry too much. Now, sometimes you need to put your ship in a position, and as we've said in all of these videos, no two games are ever the same. So you're learning through experience is always going to be your best friend, but map awareness, situational awareness are tools that you have to have in this game if you want to be successful. Now, some people just want to go out and play for fun, but typically it just befuddles me sometimes when people just go out and get dev struck game after game without really learning. It's like, how is that fun? I don't understand that aspect. But regardless here, if I was a destroyer over here at A, depending on how many destroyers were in the game, I'm going to take this outside line to A here, launching some zoning. And as soon as I get to this edge here, if a ship is spotted, sometimes some cruisers or battleships will take a wide flank. I'm going to throw, a zoning torpedoes at them. If I don't detect anything and I'm not located through RPF, or located there from Twist and Track, it's called in this game. It's RPF on PC. I'm going to take a route into A here and get this cap. If you can control this A cap, especially with like some cruiser or battleship support, once you get this A cap here, you can have some beautiful, beautiful crossfires on all of these ships over here on C. And for this particular map, this island here that the Reds get on this little diagram is far better. It just provides a lot more concealment than the opposite island here on the south side for, let's say, the Blues in this situation. So again, if I was a destroyer over here on this flank, spawning at A, and the spawns this is a PC graphic, so please don't, people are like, well, actually there's 10 ships in this particular model that's not accurate to Legends. Guys, I know, it's just a diagram I found on the internet here. Now, if there was only one destroyer in the game and we determined that he did not spawn opposite from us, it used to be that the spawns were almost mirrored, I think that has, become less and less recently. I'm not exactly 100% sure on that. But another option here at this Alpha spawn is to go to Bravo. Not only are you getting this Bravo cap, this cap here is very difficult to get mid-game. Now, of course, if you go in here and you get radared or you take a zoning torpedo, you're putting your team at a massive disadvantage being the only destroyer. But if you can get B and you figure out that the destroyer is over here at C, typically he'll try and get this cap and go wide. If you can get B, then you can get A. If you have a teammate supporting you out on this flank, preventing a ship from pushing in, kind of on your front side here, if you go from B into A, you now have the 2 cap advantage. And these ships over here at C, typically they kind of group up in this region, right where the front of this arrow is. They can sort of defend, and then these ships here at B, depending on what's over here, can get the crossfire on all of these ships at C. Sleeping Giant is one of those maps where the game is sort of divided into thirds, essentially, or at least in half. This mass group of islands here sort of separates you from these engagements over here at C. This is typically where a lot of the engagements are. But again, if I'm over here at A, I'm trying to either get Alpha or Bravo, depending on the ship lineup and what I see, and then working my way and seeing what my team needs. Now, there's also one sort of final solution here is, situation is if you are engaged with another destroyer here, you can do some laps around here or even take this outside lane, but you need to make sure you don't get caught up out here. If you get caught up out here trying to get the carrier or even the ships back here, your chances of winning go from essentially what is like 50-55% if you're a decent player to 40% because you're wasting time out here. Get the cap, do your business out here, and then either go back and get Bravo or cut through to Bravo. It's very rare that going past this center square here, these center squares in a destroyer or any ship really is going to benefit your team in a close game, right? In a wash, we all know that, it's typically you can really do whatever you want and you're still going to win. And there's certain games you could do everything and you're still going to lose. But alas, that is sort of my strategy for the destroyers on the Alpha side of this map. Now, if I was in a cruiser, I'm going to take the same line I would in a destroyer here, except I'm going to play the edge of this island. That protects me from crossfire. You can actually crossfire ships depending on their velocity and lob from this position here, if you have enough range, over here. We've done it a few times, and it just really catches them by surprise. So I'm going to take this position here in my cruiser, and especially if I'm a radar cruiser, I'm going to just slowly peek around. If I get detected in here, I'm going to pop my radar, right? You put your ship really right here, and for the Russian radars especially, you can find yourself, catching whatever is going across here, typically a destroyer on the opposite flank. Now, and then after that, if I'm not detected, I'm going to see where the enemy ships are spotted. Hopefully we have a destroyer in the middle spawning at Bravo here. He sort of sits right here. He has good spots on this. If I see battleships and cruisers moving this direction from the north enemy flank here, I'm just going to hold this position and see what they give me, right? If I don't, if they start moving this way or they're holding this inside of the island here, I am going to move into Alpha. As we just said with the destroyer, if you can get your cruiser into Alpha and actually play, you would want to play on the north side here, sort of protect. Now, you could put it right here. There's a little island there that protects you as well, because sometimes they can crossfire you into here. I have a Yoshino clip where I blind fired a Mino from this spot into here. It was great. He reported me for cheating. But again, you have beautiful crossfires, especially for these battleships who just want to be lazy and sit out here. If you have the range, you are able to absolutely just destroy them. I'm thinking like a Stalingrad or something like that with some good velocity, and it really doesn't even matter what the cruiser is. On top of that, depending on game flow, you could work your way into B. Now, that's really risky because you're just forgetting a lot of these ships out here. But you're also, if you are a radar cruiser, you have that coverage of the radar now into Bravo. So if your destroyer gets B or it's contested, if you can work your way into Alpha and then eventually help him out into Bravo. Again, this is all situation dependent. And sometimes even on this flank, I've actually taken the inside line. Radar cruisers are really good. It really depends on if I'm solo, it depends on what these ships out here do. If they all abandon, I typically take this inside lane and I just hope that our team can get B and C. Now, if they go outside, I go out and support them. This is where you sort of have to play off of your team. If you even get one ship to go out here and you know the capabilities of your ship, if you're really slow and sluggish in a battleship, I would not go out here by myself. Especially if you have a destroyer who spawns with you and fucks off somewhere else, you're basically just setting yourself up to get torpedoed by an enemy Shima or something. But alas, that is sort of the strategy that I would take for cruisers over here on this alpha flank. And the same essentially goes for battleships. Now, battleships I might take a little bit wider depending on the situation. Again, if my two teammates over here go off to sea, I know that this game's probably going to be a loss, and I might just linger out here until I'm spotted and then sort of do like a J hook around and either attract the enemy destroyer or what have you. Again, it's situational awareness, and it comes through playing the game and seeing just the different scenarios that play out. This is, I'm not gonna lie, this is a tough position for a battleship, but you can actually lob. I've lobbed some salvos from the opposite side here over and gotten 30, 40K salvos from battleships that our destroyer has spotted from this opposite flank here. So again, this island, this masked island here is somewhat protective, but you need to be wary of shots floating over these islands here. So again, if I'm in a battleship, I'm trying to go out here, potentially maybe a little bit wider if my cruiser's here, so I can get some shots on these ships back here. On top of that, as soon as I get this, depending on what happens, we get into A, and as we mentioned, A is just a fantastic crossfire. Once you get this crossfire here, if you can get 2-3 lobs, even beyond these, not this position here, beyond these islands, these ships that may have won the seaside, there's so many games where I've gotten in the Petro and just other battleships even where we have just decimated these ships because they're all focused on this opposite sea flank here, and you just have glorious, glorious crossfires. But anyway, that is the strategy portion for Alpha. Again, guys, 1,000,001 things can happen. You just have to read game flow. I can't, telling you exactly what to do every game is never going to work, because you could go out here and the enemy could send 6 ships this way, and you just know that you can't rush it aggressively. So you really, most of this game is sort of reacting to what the enemy does and putting your ship in the right spot to do so. Now, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you think you know, and you got a Kraken out here once and a high caliber, and then all of a sudden you get shit on. It happens, right? But by putting yourselves in those, advantageous positions early game, you're far more likely to do better than you are to just, get rolled. If you sail directly, and let's move on to the Bravo cap here. If you sail your battleship directly through B, you're just gonna get, you're just gonna get rolled by every possible angle here, and probably torpedoed by a destroyer in the middle. But alas, let's move on to the Bravo cap, as we said. And we don't really have a destroyer here, but let's say a destroyer spawns. I think you spawn right around here. But basically, I'm taking my destroyer and I'm moving on over to the Bravo cap. If I spawn B here, and even if I'm the only destroyer, depending on what I'm in, most destroyers can handle this Bravo cap. You just have to know that this is a massive open cap, which is susceptible to zoning torpedoes. So I'm either going to turn early and get wide here, or I'm going to go this way, turn maybe a little bit, go into the cap, utilizing these islands, and kind of do that J-hook turn to where the butt end of my destroyer is facing this way, so I can escape easily. On top of that, you need to pay attention to radar cruisers. This little island here is a good spot. Let's draw it on the opposite flank here. Is a good spot for enemy radar cruisers to sort of counter destroyers sitting in this position. And also, this little island alcove here, this is it takes a minute sort of to get into this position, but this is actually a really good position if you can avoid getting spotted right away for an enemy radar cruiser or the north side radar cruiser. But again, if I'm in the Bravo cap, I'm seeing what the enemy gives me. If there's radar cruisers, I'm playing it very passively. Again, as we stated with the Alpha cap, if you can get that Bravo cap early game, you're putting your team at a massive, massive advantage. I don't know why this is so difficult to grasp, but as soon as you get 2 out of 3 caps in domination, the enemy has to move to you, or else they lose. It's so frustrating to see people and players gain advantages just to simply throw them away. Once you get that 2 or even 3 cap advantage, sit back and enjoy the crossfires and the mistakes that the enemy are about to make. When you see at the top, imagine the menu at the top, when you see those 3 red circles, it just creates this panic for some players with IQ points. For others, they're just sailing off, not caring in the world. But it creates that panic of, oh gosh, we've got to make a move or we're going to lose, which you should be thinking in games. What is the next play that I can make in order to win? Get the cap, destroy a few ships, move on over and get the other cap. But again, once you control these two caps, the enemy is sort of forced to slowly leak into these channels or take this way, or even come on the round, let's say they spawn on the north side, to come around this backside here. So as soon as you can gain those defensive positions, you've got them exactly where you want them. So again, that would be my position in a destroyer here. Now, this is where the nuance comes in, especially in a destroyer. If I'm here in the middle and there's a destroyer over here at Charlie and there's a destroyer over here at Alpha, if I'm working my way and I spawn in the middle here and I see that the friendly destroyer here is deciding to go to A, I'm taking his place. I'm taking his place, or I'm filling the gap that he left. Again, I like to use the analogy of football or soccer, whatever you want to call it. American football and soccer, actually, and European football. You wouldn't leave the left side of your field completely open, right? So zone defense is just again, if the destroyer on the left here leaves the A zone open, I'm trying to fill that zone. Now, I may go help him here and then move over to A. It's very map dependent. If I'd see no ships moving over here, then I wouldn't potentially do that. But again, you're trying to fill the zones that your dumb teammates leave you, right? If I'm a cruiser over here and all of my ships abandon this side, you've got to fill that zone. Or you find yourself in a black hole with all 8 of your ships over here and the enemy is just shooting fish in a barrel. If you're finding yourself near a mass majority of your teammates, let's say 2 or more, you should move. Now, again, if you're a radar cruiser at this island here, it's difficult to make that decision because you really need that concealment and your radar is useful. Or if you're sort of like an island, humping cruiser, it's difficult. But if you're in like the Venezia, the Amalfi or something, get out here. Get out here on the flanks and be where your team isn't. It's always better to have multiple different ships. Let's say one is here, right? Another is here. So that way, even if a destroyer decides to hide at this island here, which is protected from this cruiser, if you're over here and he gets radared, you can shoot him. The magic of crossfires is something that if you're trying to learn this game and become better, that you have to think about essentially at all times. But anyway, that is sort of the play as a destroyer over here in this Bravo cap. Moving on over to play in a cruiser, and this is where there's 2 million situations here. Typically, previously, I would have taken this island over here at sea. However, a lot of these ships over here at sea congregate at this island. So recently, not recently, but you either take this position over here at the south side of Alpha, or this island here looking at Bravo, depending on what you're in and the situation. As you guys remember, or if you remember in that Pozharsky game, we went to about right here. We did have a fellow destroyer in our division, so it's situation dependent, but he actually smoked us and we had our smoke screen and we were able to sit right here, and I think we raked a few targets moving across here, and then we were just able to get like 60k worth of free damage, maybe even more, of all these ships on this flank because no one supported the middle on the Reds. Eventually, we then moved our ship over into this position here, and we basically were undetected the entire game, just raining down Russian AP on the enemy. So again, you could take your cruiser and you could go all the way over to Alpha and probably be successful if you help win this flank quickly, or you could take this island here. I've done it a few times, especially in my more like my American cruisers, which sort of they really thrive next to islands, and take like an inside position here. You see what's over here first, because if a battleship goes wide, you're crossfired in this channel. But once you can sort of get in this channel here, again, you have great radar coverage of this Bravo cap, and you're able to sort of defend your destroyer or the ships in the middle here against this little crossfire. Also, you potentially, if you get there quick enough, you can have crossfire on these ships over here. Again, it's all about developing crossfires. And finally, to the battleships, and I don't know, you guys should know the roles of cruisers and battleships, but the role of a cruiser is to support your team in any way necessary, right? The main role really is to eliminate destroyers, especially radar cruisers. After that, you're sort of trying to defend the caps. And then a side role really in a cruiser is DPM. And then the sort of the caveat role for for cruisers, because there's many different varieties in this game, is basically whatever your team needs. If you're a Stalingrad or a Russian heavy or something like that, a little bit of your responsibility in the game is to attract damage. You shouldn't really be hiding at the back of the map, spamming HE the entire time. In any ship, really, but let's use a Mino as an example. In a Mino, you're really not trying to attract that much damage. I mean, you certainly can if you know how to play it correctly, but just given the very thin armor scheme of the Mino, you really shouldn't be attracting damage. So that fourth role in cruisers is really whatever your team needs. If you need to attract damage, you've got to do that. If you've got to go cap, let's say you're playing a concealment build meme and there's no other destroyers, you can work your ship into cap. On top of that, you could also defend the caps. And again, you're just fulfilling the roles that your team is not, essentially. So again, if your team isn't capping, you got to cap. If they're not doing damage, you got to do damage. If they're not attracting damage, you got to attract damage. Cruisers are essentially the jack of all trades in that regard. And of course, battleships are the tanks, right? Your main role in a battleship is to attract damage. I cannot express how frustrating it is to see battleship players spawn here and instantly hit B and put their ships back here. You could not be more useless. Yes, certain battleships do fare better at sniping at long ranges. However, if you are playing this back island here for a majority of the time, you are going to be the most useless fucking player on the planet. And I promise you, even if you have a good game, unless the enemy team is far worse, you're going to lose that game and you're going to be leaving your team out to dry. As we mentioned in the beginning, just don't leave your team out to dry. But anyway, the final cap here is the Charlie cap, and probably the easiest to play. Everyone sort of knows how to play this one. If I'm a destroyer, I'm going straight, beelining it out to this region here. It gives me a lot of versatility. We're trying to get this cap, but we're also watching out for the enemy destroyers doing the same. This region here is zoning, number one zoning lane in this, on this map here is this zoning torpedo lane out here. So I'm throwing some zoning torpedoes of my own, and depending on whether I'm a sonar or radar destroyer, I'm working my way in sort of in the narrow cap. If I'm not, and I'm a little bit faster, or I don't have that offensive or defensive capabilities, I'm J-hooking it into this region of the cap here and watching out for torpedoes. Again, if you turn your destroyer fully around, you are able to escape, because if a radar cruiser works his way, it's risky, but if he works his way to here, he will potentially have radar and shots on you, especially back here. This, like we mentioned earlier, this island is very beneficial for players who spawn on this north side. But that's sort of also, once you get the cap in a destroyer, you can go out here. I've done it a few times, but depending on what happens is on, it's really dependent on what is going on in the rest of the game. If your team is getting, just absolutely mugged over here, you need to go to this side or go back to B quickly. Now, if they're tied and, you can go back here and get these torpedoes on target, but you have to get the cap and you have to spot for your team. That is Destroyer 101. Now, if I'm in a cruiser, like we talked about, I spawn here, I'm going directly to this island. Now, depending on what I'm in, if I'm in a French or Italian cruiser, maybe I'm going out here, maybe Japanese in the Zhao, I might sit right here. If you have concealment, you can kind of, I like to J-hook around this island and play right about here. We've had a few decent games in the Amalfi, just SAPing different targets, because typically your battleships are going to sit right here and just sort of attract that damage or try and dish it out. And in most situations, they're typically spotted over here, but anyway, you can do a good bit of damage. You can actually clip a little bit of that island from this position here. Now, if I'm in an American cruiser or like Russian cruiser or something that is a little bit more with a radar and or the spam without maybe the best agility, I am sitting in this position here and trying to get crossfires on these ships going out here, as well as thinking about moving my ship into this position eventually, depending on what's out here, to help support Bravo. So yeah, this island here on the south side and even the north side is pretty self-explanatory. Over here at sea, it's just really wherever you want to put or position your ship, and what ship you're in is sort of dictates the objective for that for this sea flank. And finally, battleships over here at the Charlie flank. Again, it depends. If you're in a sniping battleship, you can kind of move up and sit right here. You need to watch out for a little bit of the crossfires here and the spam from this island. If you can get a Worcester back here or something like that, you are just toast. So again, the defensive sort of kiting angled position is really good for a lot of the battleships, something like the Conch, the Burgoyne, the Loria, a lot of those things, basically anything except for Vermont and slower battleships, and the Conch's kind of slow, but it lends a lot better to defensive positions. You can also get your battleship out here. Now, taking this front route, in front of this island is probably a mistake. We've actually done it to where we kind of bounce into this island a lot, and you have some decent crossfires over here. Again, it's situational dependent. If there's a lot of ships over here, you need to play it passive. If there's one or two and you get an elimination, you got to play it aggressive. You got to get those crossfires and move your ship sort of wide there. You can also, if you've got like a Schlieffen or, Atlantico or something, you can sort of play it right here, get a few shots, and work your ship into this position here. If you can manage to catch that destroyer, or even here, right? If you can work, kind of a brawling battleship into a position like this, it is just you're a thorn in the side of the enemy because they can't really get some good broadside shots on you unless they're way out here, at which point they're sort of exposing themselves to any of your other ships and your destroyer here, pending, that's what's in your game. So you're sort of a thorn in the side of the enemy here, and if you can catch them sort of off guard, if there's a cruiser here without torpedoes, or even with torpedoes, if you can catch him off guard, your secondaries are going, the enemy, this whole half of the map has to be wary of you. If not, then you get a pretty good game there. So again, it's all situational dependent. I do these videos because I've seen so much bad play, especially recently, and that's a good thing. That means there's a lot of new players, but also it's not a good thing when you're sitting there and 8 of your teammates are going over here to C because they had a good game once out here. I know that sometimes certain spawns, like Shard's B spawn, is probably the least favorite spawn in this game. And you don't have to go gung-ho right down the middle, but you have to defend it in some fashion, right? If you divvy up the map into halves or even thirds there, let's say halves. If 4 of your teammates are over here, or if 5 of them are over here, you gotta help defend the left side. You can't just group up with the rest of your 5 teammates, leaving essentially a toilet bowl or what is called a lemming train or a black hole. Basic strategy is just being where your team isn't and trying to fill in those zones that we were talking about. But that's sort of a strategy video there for Sleeping Giant. I hope you guys enjoyed that one. Again, I will link the Pozharsky video that we were talking about. Now that video was with a division, which always, playing in a division sometimes is the only thing that keeps me sane in this game. But I do play a good amount of my games solo, and I understand the frustration. So again, these strategies and tutorials and videos it's really, if you're in a division with great players, you can absolutely wipe one of these flanks. You know what your teammates are doing. When I'm solo, I'm definitely a lot more passive, playing off of what my sometimes clueless blue teammates are doing. Sometimes though, if you get like a clueless blue teammate rushing his battleship up this flank, you can take massive advantage of that by getting the crossfires while they are, the enemy is distracted. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that one. It's probably way too long already, but we will see you guys on the flip side there. Love you guys. Have a great day. Aaron out. Peace.